So we talked with Ari Warner and we said, we know we've done all this work in which we had paid them $35,700 to do all the design work down there. But we really think that we need to move these up to the top. Is that possible? Can a screening unit run 4 stories up? They said yes. We went and looked at examples. They exist. The company said they could do it. Fine, let's move them up to the top. So we then hired them to do $29,200 worth of redesign to bring them up to the 4th floor. And we paid them a little extra money because this is a class 1, div 1 area, which means everything has to be explosive and all the design is much more expensive. All the equipment's much more expensive because it's an explosion proof area. So we went through all that and we got about to the 90% mark. And this would have been over the summer. And over the summer, if you look at this picture, it's kind of black and white, but it shows a mangled screen. And you can't, it's hard, it's difficult to see, but there's a little chunk of metal that's down in the corner. So when we were in 90% design review, this happened to the existing screens. So we said, if this happens, these screens are now about 11 feet below, 8 feet, about 20, 22 feet total length. The new screens are going to be 72 in length. And we had to make this repair down in the sewer. So we said, if this occurs, what is our maintenance procedure? Well, we ran through the costs with the company and we knew what it cost us to make this repair, which was $16,000 for the company, $11,000 in parts, plus all of our time. So we were looking at $20,000, $30,000. So if this thing is now 3 times as tall and weighs 3 times as much, how are we going to make this repair? What was determined, we had to bring in a crane. We had to bring in the company again. They gave us some estimates. And all of a sudden, we're up in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range if this occurs again, per event. So this has been mangled several times over its lifetime. Not to this extent, but bad enough that we said, are we sure that we want to go with now a 72-foot long unit? Now, remember, there was going to be 2 of them. So either one of the units could have broken at huge expense. So we asked one more time, is there any way that we can possibly move this out? And what I had suggested, and you can look at the large number 2 picture, we said, can we move this completely out of the danger zone, out of the flood zone, out of the class 1 explosion zone, everything. And we had wanted to bring it up to ground level, but if you look down in the middle of the page where it says current location in red, we now determined that with some serious concrete work and some design, we could move it all the way up to the beginning of the system. The pumps lifted all the way up 80 feet to the grit chamber. We could put this in front of the grit chamber and eliminate all the problems. So I said, rather than take the risk of incurring some maintenance, all the added expense of these new longer units and the headache that could cause, let's again examine the design, go back to the mayor and see if we want to take this next leap and move it up to the top. We decided it was worth doing. In the long run, it is the best decision, but it was going to cost more design money. So Ari Warner had come back with a new proposal to move it all the way up. And if you look at this picture here, very crude, but it's the grassy picture, and it shows roughly where the new unit would be situated up there. And we called the company, we said, could we do it? They said we could, instead of 2 units, we could reduce it down to 1. Instead of a 72-foot unit, we could reduce it to a 10-foot unit. The 10-foot unit could pivot out for maintenance and bypass. So we got a whole litany of features on top of lower maintenance costs by moving it up there. So I went back to Ori Warner. We said that their initial $55,800 proposal, is there any way we can cut some costs? And so what you end up is with the proposal they have in front of you for $39,150. When we had a meeting, we went over some design points that we borrowed from some other work that we had done in the plan, which lessened the cost. I asked them to really sharpen their pencils. We reviewed all the previous work that we had done and how we can reuse some of that work. Some of that work is wasted. Some of it is going to be reused. But when I look at the numbers and I look at the future maintenance costs, I think it's better to make the correction now than incur tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in maintenance later. And if this was my plant, I would make the change. If it was my house, I would make the change. So that's basically the summary of how we got to this latest proposal from Ari Warner for $39,150 to do the design to move the screens all the way to the top. And of course, because of the total sum of the project, it's well over $50,000. We had to bring it to you for your consideration.
How long was, excuse me, or how long will this project take from start to end?
Because they believe they can leave most of the old stuff running while they're building the new. I think it's a year.
And there won't be any interruption and or effect on us and our
No,
service?
because they will build this new section off and then abandon the old and plumb it into the end, there won't be any interruption. That's the nice part about it as well.
I was looking at the picture where it shows the water flooded. How high has that chamber, that area flooded in the past?
That level is actually, I believe that's 17 feet. The total height, and you can see it, if you look down at the upper left-hand picture, you're looking down 4 stories. Those holes that you see in the wall, those lights, were all underwater at 32 feet. And when I was digging out the drawings for this, part of the reason why we decided we also had to move it out is that wet well is designed to flood. It's designed to flood in the 25-year storm to a certain level, which the screens were under, and it's designed to flood to a 100-year level. So with this new design, we are removing everything from the wet well where it's supposed to flood. There will be nothing down there anymore, not even electrical conduits. It's all coming up and out. So everything that's going down is temporary, so it can be removed because it's going to flood again. And we all know from based on storms, when they say it's a 25 or 100-year storm, 100-year storm happens every year. So this will continue to flood.
So what exactly with this screen system breaks when it floods? Is it electrical things that are in there?
Yeah,
or?
well, it's the mechanical if it gets wedged. But also all that structure, there's 3 motors, there's 3 drive motors, they're all shot, and they're all explosion-proof motors, so they're 4 times as much as a normal motor. The gearing, all the oils, the greases, the gear reducers they all get inundated with water, rust, and it is a nightmare each time it happens.
So this picture here that you showed us,
Yes.
was this due to a flood or was this just another circumstance where it broke?
That actually occurred after a flood, but that's not necessarily related to a flood.
Okay.
What happens with the increased flood waters is they can bring in larger, heavier chunks of debris. So that piece of metal could have been making its way down the sewer with each successive flood until it finally got into the screens and jammed them up. So if by moving it up there, the 4-story wet well is now going to capture all that debris because the pumps are off the ground. So that would have fallen out and the pumps would pick it up and would not even pick up that size debris. So that you do get kind of a buffer against the large debris.
How many times would you say that room has flooded over the years since you've been here?
Well, it's flooded every year for 7 years, multiple times a year. So probably close to 14. And I'm told it's flooded even before that when the screens, my maintenance guys estimated about 35 times since I've been here.
Have other plants around the area had the same problem, or they built it differently in the original buildup, or, I mean, how have they had this same circumstance happen in their place?
Yeah, all wells are designed to flood.
Okay.
Why they decided, well, the reason they decided to put the equipment down there was that there were manual bar screens that they didn't want to go down and manually rate. And they wanted to protect the pumps. But there's a 6mm plate screens down there. They're very, very small holes in them, about the size of a pencil eraser. So you only need very coarse manual screens down at the bottom, which rarely need raked. And then the fine screens can be up where they're more protected. You don't want to put such a delicate screen piece of equipment way down in the worst part of the plant where it floods. You're just asking for trouble.
And the main purpose of these screens really is to strain out all the rocks and debris and things that are in the water.
Well, rags, you wouldn't believe the amount of rag material, little plastic pieces of things. They'll screen out toilet paper that comes through. Anything, we want just basically clear gray water going into the process. Hair, anything you can think of comes with the screens we touch. Lots of toys, bicycles, body parts,
Guys,
cats.
what's the normal lifespan of a screen?
Before they need a rebuild, it can be anywhere from like 8 to 12 years.
What about the ones we've had right now? How many screens have been through your 7 years there?
Well, if you count all the motors, we've probably replaced 30, 40 motors over the time span. A few gearboxes, the chains and the panels, hundreds of panels was replaced, but they wear out over time. So they're that was a wear item. The chains have lasted pretty good too, until that catastrophic failure where it just ripped everything. Mostly it's the motors and the gearboxes that are the wear items to go.
What cleans the screens?
So as it hits the screen, it rotates up. It's on chain, and it comes up and it rolls over, and there's a brush on the top that knocks the stuff off, and then there's a sprayer that sprays the stuff off, and then the chain goes back down in the channel, comes back up, and there's a drop box which you see. You can actually see it at the end in the one picture. There's a little hopper down there where all the debris falls into, and then it is kind of screwed up and compressed into a bin. It's very disgusting. The most disgusting stuff out there. I think, so maybe vouch for that. He was down there, and so has Jeff's been down there many times. It's the worst part of the plant, and the most labor intensive. It's a confined space. So getting all this stuff out of there solves so many problems. And we would have moved it all the way up to this location if the early indicators hadn't been that we couldn't do it. It's just that the engineers didn't move it far enough up in their initial analysis. So now it's going all the way up.
So besides the relocation of this and adding the equipment that's needed, would we need any additional software or training to go along with it?
Now the new equipment that we examined, it's going to be so much smaller and so easily controlled that we will basically just turn it on and forget it. It's it has its own PLCs which measure level. And the screen doesn't operate all the time. It only operates when it gets clogged, and then it cleans itself. So it's not rotating all the time.
And in addition to the increased engineering costs, you talked about cement, all this,
Yeah.
recreate this. How much extra will that?
Well, what we really worked on was we have to put a new pipe going up there, which isn't that big of a deal. But a new pipe has to come in and then turn into a new channel where the screen's gonna rest. And we think that the screening unit and the concrete work, because it is up on that hill, that's where all the engineering is gonna come into. Is the trough that initially goes into the screening unit with the bypass, and how far they have to go down to get to solid footing, how far the footage. Now, we discussed in other portions of the plant, we used columns instead of completely poured walls. So that's one of the reasons the design came down, is we're gonna try to set these on pillars. And we're gonna have a section of pipe instead of all concrete. So there'll be pipe into concrete, which we should save a considerable amount of money. There, I think it's gonna be somewhere around 800,000,
Sorry.
700 to 800,000.
Or
Well, we were estimating 700,000, but that was when we were buying 2 units that were 72 feet long. So we're getting one smaller unit. It's wider, but it's smaller. And so we don't have to buy 2 units. And the structure needed to hold that is smaller because the unit's small. It's not as long, I should say. So I think, I don't, you know, I don't even want to say that. These contractors, everything is so in disarray. I never know what they're going to bid anymore in this market. But I think it's actually going to be, it could be cheaper. Because the stainless steel cost of each of those 72 runs is pretty expensive. Each panel is 8 inches wide. And I don't know if I have that number in there. But 8 inches over 72 feet down, 72 feet up. And do that on 2 units times 500. There's a lot of money in just stainless steel panels.
So you've talked about 3 different things. We have 72-foot this.
Yes,
Did we already appropriate 72 foot?
Have budgeted 700,000 for the project.
Okay, so the 700 is already appropriated.
That's
So won't the engineering study that this is paid for come up with that estimate?
yes, yes, and they again, in the last 3 projects we bid, the contracts have all come in over the engineering estimate. So everybody's afraid to give an engineering estimate. I mean, the super hut that we were just getting an engineering estimate for came in at 3 times the amount that we thought. So they haven't given me a solid number yet.
Don't take this wrong, but as long as I've been here, rarely had an estimate from French Creek come in.
Well, I'm well,
And this isn't you, it's the estimates that we get.
I am too optimistic. I should estimate high.
But we can do all this for about the same amount of money, and it sounds good. Question that you work with every day, I don't. When you take away 2 systems and go to 1, isn't there a challenge of what if 1 breaks? You don't have a backup.
Well, the neat thing about this one is that this unit actually pivots by hand. It's so down that you can tilt it out of the water and then make the repairs. So we also have a bypass. So when it goes down, we feel that making the repair will be so much quicker and easier and faster. And even if we do have to bypass for a while, it's not that big of a deal. There'll be a manual screen right next to it. Not as fine, but enough to get us through. And so we just think that we think it will be easy to fix.
What are the intentions with the old equipment, the motor, the chain, the screen, are those, is there any resale value to those?
Just the recycling cost, and we normally turn that, because they tear the thing apart, getting it out so extensively, that they scrap it out. So we let them figure that scrap cost into their bid price.
And by putting it out, the system out, it will eliminate those EX motors.
Oh, yeah, the explosive proposers, yes.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't that take a specialized electrician to work with those things?
Well, I guess, I don't think so. I could double check that, but we've always done them ourselves. What it is that the seals that go around the wire are really where it's all at.
I'm
Now,
familiar with the EX.
yeah, you probably have to deal with explosive proof stuff too. And well, when our maintenance guys make repairs on them, they make the repairs. The original installation is going to be by a common contractor or Zenith Electric or something like that.
Councilman Winkle, can you confirm that as far as the EX?
Is the whole room gonna be no longer exposure proof?
Yeah.
So that not only with the motors, but the entire equipment package will be less.
Right.
But
But I
tens of
suggest
thousands of
does
dollars.
not take a electrician with specialized certification.
If you're licensed and bonded and you do it to code, to explosion proof standards, to go and your license is bonded, you're good to go.
You're saying that that's part of the savings in itself.
Well, it's the equipment alone, you're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know your specs or anything, probably tens of thousands of dollars less.
Oh, yeah. And what's gonna be it's gonna be covered and in a heated structure. The air turnover to make it not explosion proof and the things they have to do is a lot simpler. The building's gonna be very, very simple that covers it, encloses it. But included in this package, there was a lot of ancillary wiring and conduit that had to be redone to explosion proof standards. In the new bid, that's just gonna be torn out. And there's gonna be lighting at the top and temporary lights that we're gonna take down so that everything can be removed from the wet well and not fastened to the walls. So there'll be some changes there that might save us some money. Although I hesitate to say that now because I don't know until the bid comes in.
Good explanation, thank you.
Thank you. Any
Any other members of council questions? Any comments from mayor's administration? Board, thank you so much for being here this evening and
Thank you.
shedding some light on this for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Corey, thank you. You guys do a great job. You know, it's a model for a lot of cities wish they had what we had. And you do a very nice job on it.
Thank you for your support.
Any final comments? Hearing none, please adjourn.
Thanks, Corey. Thank you.
Nothing. It may make it more refreshing, but.
It will be
It's
refreshing.
not gonna be short. Spend the third
Yes.
Sure. Do you need anything else?
And
Tell me everything that you want.